My boyfriend's gambling almost destroyed everything, but my love and patience helped him rebuild his life and save our relationship. I always thought James and I had it all figured out. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew your business before you even did, it felt like nothing could surprise us. We were inseparable since high school, classmates, friends, confidants, and eventually, lovers. By the time we turned 24, we had been together for over half our lives. I could still remember the first time he held my hand in the hallway, the first time we laughed until our stomachs hurt, and the countless moments where he made even the most mundane days feel magical. Moving to the big city had been our dream. The promise of new opportunities, endless possibilities, and a fresh start away from the small town gossip. Life here was different, exciting, but also overwhelming. Skyscrapers replaced trees, crowded streets replaced quiet lanes, and temptation seemed to lurk around every corner. Casinos, online gambling platforms, flashy billboards. It was like the city itself was daring us to stumble. But I trusted James. I trusted him with everything. He had always been smart, responsible, and thoughtful. He had a good job, steady income, and an innate sense of what was right. I loved him not just for who he was, but for the future I believed we could build together. That I knew about his small fascination with gambling. Or at least, I thought I did. It seemed harmless at first, a weekend hobby, maybe a few coins here and there for fun, never anything serious. I told myself it was a quirk, a little thrill that made him feel alive in a way that didn't hurt anyone. I joked about it, teased him, even participated in casual bets on sports just for fun. In my mind, it was all innocent. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't see, was that what I assumed was harmless had quietly started to spiral into something darker. I often caught myself worrying late at night, staring at the ceiling while James slept beside me. Am I overthinking this? I asked myself. Does he really know his limits? But every time, I brushed the thought away. I wanted to trust him completely, because love meant trust, didn't it? Love meant believing in someone even when the world whispered doubts in your ear. And for a long time, that belief was enough. James could make me laugh like no one else, even on days I felt tired or anxious. He remembered everything, the tiniest details of my life, the little stories I told in passing, the exact way I liked my coffee in the morning. And I loved him for it. I loved the boy I had fallen in love with in 10th grade, the one whose hand still felt like home, whose laughter still made my chest ache with happiness. I wanted to believe that nothing, not even this city full of temptation, could change who he was. I imagined our life together, small apartment filled with laughter and the aroma of cooking, weekends exploring new neighborhoods, and quiet nights talking about dreams and fears. We were supposed to be the perfect couple, navigating the challenges of life together, building a foundation of trust and love. But even in my happiest fantasies, I felt a faint twinge of unease, something I couldn't quite name, a whisper in the back of my mind warning me that life in this big city wasn't as simple as our high school dreams. For now, though, I pushed it aside. I told myself it was just the stress of adapting to a new place. I reminded myself that we had each other, that our bond was strong, and that together we could face anything. Little did I know, that tiny spark of doubt, the part of me that had noticed the occasional late-night withdrawals, the subtle secrecy around money, the little excuses, would soon become the foundation of a much larger, more terrifying reality. Because as perfect as James seemed, as strong as our love felt, there were things hidden beneath the surface, habits I didn't fully understand, and consequences that neither of us were prepared to face. And I had no idea that what I thought was just a harmless quirk could one day threaten not only our life together, but the very future we were dreaming of. It started with little things at first, tiny inconsistencies that I tried to ignore. A receipt that didn't make sense, a late-night text that he quickly hid when I walked into the room, a phone call he said was work-related that lasted far too long. I wanted to trust him, to believe that nothing serious was going on. After all, I'd known James for over a decade. We had grown up together, and I had always seen him as responsible, dependable. But the gnawing feeling at the edge of my mind refused to quiet down. Then came the small withdrawals, the ones he claimed were for bills or investments. At first, I didn't question it, but the numbers didn't add up. Money that should have been in savings seemed gone. And yet, He continued to live comfortably, going out to dinner with me, paying rent, laughing at silly movies on the couch, as if everything was normal. It was confusing. A part of me refused to believe he could be reckless, yet the evidence was mounting, piece by piece, that I began to notice his subtle avoidance. Sometimes, when I asked about finances, his smile would falter just slightly, a shadow passing over his face before he reassured me with a soft, "Don't worry, I've got it." And I believed him. At least I tried. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that stress was making me suspicious. But the unease wouldn't leave. Point one evening, we were walking home from dinner, and he mentioned a new online game he had tried just for fun. Something in the way he described it, the excitement in his voice, the pride he seemed to take in small wins, made my stomach twist. I didn't say anything at the time. I smiled, held his hand, and listened as if it were a harmless story. But inside, a storm was brewing. I began to piece together what these small thrills could mean, what kind of risk he might be taking without my knowledge. And then there was the stress. Even small things would make him tense. A missed deadline at work, a delayed bank transfer, a phone call he didn't want to take. His mood swings were subtle but noticeable, the kind that make you pause and wonder if something bigger is happening behind closed doors. I watched him carefully, noting patterns, but never confronting him directly. I knew that confrontation too early could push him further into secrecy. I had to be strategic, patient. I started small, testing his reactions, observing without judgment. I noticed the way he avoided my gaze when I mentioned money, how he stiffened slightly when I asked about savings, and how quickly he could change the topic if I lingered too long. It was subtle, almost imperceptible if you weren't paying close attention, but I couldn't ignore it. I realized that his gambling, the little thing I had once considered innocent, might be more serious than I had ever imagined. That realization terrified me, not just for our finances, but for him, for us, for everything we had built together. I loved him more than I could put into words, and the thought that he might be slowly destroying our life without even realizing it filled me with dread. But I couldn't show panic. I couldn't confront him yet. I had to find a way to guide him back before it was too late. So I began to plan, subtly, carefully. Every gesture, every word, every small interaction I had with him would have a purpose. My goal was to make him feel valued, capable, and loved, to strengthen his sense of responsibility, and to remind him, without saying a word, that he mattered more to me than any fleeting thrill. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it could take months, maybe even years, to slowly pull him away from the edge. But I was ready. I had to be, because losing him wasn't an option. It hit me slowly, like a creeping shadow I couldn't shake. The small inconsistencies, the subtle tension, the furtive glances, they were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. And then I found it. Not all at once, but in fragments. Bills I didn't recognize, statements with withdrawals I hadn't authorized, and whispers of loans he had taken out. I felt my stomach twist, a heavy, sinking weight pressing down on me. This wasn't just a harmless game anymore. This was real, and it was dangerous. James had always been smart with money. I trusted him completely. Our savings, our shared plans, our little dreams for the future, all of it depended on his carefulness. Yet here, it was, slipping through his fingers. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel before my eyes, yet it was ours. I wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but something inside me, a mix of fear and love, held me back. I needed a plan. I couldn't let panic drive him further into secrecy. Every day, I watched him, piecing together his habits without letting him see. The late-night computer sessions, the unexplained errands, the sudden flurry of messages from unfamiliar contacts. It was all pointing to one conclusion. He had been hiding far more than I had ever imagined. And with every new piece of evidence, my anxiety grew, but so did my resolve. I wasn't going to abandon him. I loved him too much to give up, but the scale of it terrified me. He hadn't just dabbled. He had dug himself into a hole. The bills weren't just a few $100s. They were thousands. Loans I hadn't even known existed were suddenly real threats. And worse, I discovered that he had used collateral. Our apartment, our savings, even our cars. Everything we had, built together, was on the line, all because of a habit I had once believed harmless. It was a paradox of emotions: fear, anger, love, and determination all swirling inside me. I had to keep it together to maintain a calm exterior while planning carefully how to save him, how to save us. I couldn't let him know I had uncovered the truth. That revelation had to wait. Right now, he needed me to be his anchor, not his accuser. I focused on small gestures. A lingering touch when he seemed tense, a gentle smile when he looked stressed, soft words that reminded him of his value and our life together. I complimented his decisions at work, celebrated his accomplishments, and constantly reinforced the belief that he was capable, responsible, and loved. Every little interaction was a thread, slowly weaving him back toward stability, away from the edge I could see him teetering on. I started imagining our future differently, not just surviving his addiction, but reclaiming our lives together. Every dollar lost was a temporary setback. Every secret a challenge we could overcome if we faced it together. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The deeper he had sunk, the harder it would be to climb back. But I also knew that with patience, strategy, and unwavering support, I could guide him back to himself. Every night, as he slept beside me, I would think about the plan I needed to execute. Each gesture, each word, each act of love was a carefully placed step, designed to strengthen him without shaming him, to give him confidence without judgment, and to remind him that he was worth more than any fleeting thrill. I didn't yet know if it would work, but I had no choice but to try, because giving up on him was not an option. Not now, not ever. The subtle signs I had been noticing weren't just small quirks anymore. The problem was escalating faster than I had anticipated, and the stakes were growing higher every single day. James started spending longer hours away from home, supposedly at work, supposedly with friends, supposedly running errands. But the tension in his shoulders, the occasional panic flicker in his eyes when I casually asked about money, told me a different story. He wasn't just playing casually anymore. He was trapped in something much bigger. Then came the first real shock. I found out, not from him, but by accident, that he had used our apartment and our 3 cars as collateral for gambling loans. My heart sank so deeply I could barely breathe. Everything we had worked for, every bit of security we had painstakingly built, was now at risk. And yet, he still smiled at me like nothing was wrong, still held my hand and made jokes like everything was fine. That smile broke me and terrified me at the same time that I realized then that this was far beyond a small thrill. James had hidden it expertly, masking the severity of the situation with charm and casual confidence. And I couldn't confront him yet. Not with anger, not with accusations. That would only push him deeper into secrecy, deepen his shame, and possibly destroy the fragile thread of trust that still existed. I doubled down on subtlety. Every morning, I made sure to show appreciation for the little things he did. Waking up early, making coffee, finishing work tasks, things he probably thought I didn't notice. Every evening, I reminded him, gently, that he was responsible, capable, and loved. I celebrated even the tiniest responsible choices, every small decision he made that leaned toward stability, and it worked in small, almost imperceptible ways. I could see fleeting moments of pride in his eyes, moments where he seemed to remember that he wasn't defined by this addiction, that he had value beyond the numbers he risked in gambling. But the danger was still real, looming over us like a storm cloud I couldn't chase away. Every time I thought about our future, about the life we had dreamed of in this city, I felt a tightening in my chest. Would we lose it all? Could love alone save us from financial ruin and emotional collapse? I reminded myself constantly, it was not just about money. It was about him, about us, about making sure he knew he was more important to me than any fleeting thrill, any gamble, any risk. Despite the fear and anxiety gnawing at me, I refused to let despair show. I had to be strong for both of us. I had to be the anchor, the safe place he could come back to when the world, and his own impulses, threatened to pull him under. And I knew that this battle would not be won in a single conversation or confrontation. It would take patience, consistency, and a careful combination of love and subtle guidance. Even as the debts mounted, even as our life teetered on the edge of uncertainty, I never let James feel that I doubted him. I smiled, I laughed, I celebrated the little victories, and I held on to the belief that, deep down, he could find his way back, if I just stayed by his side. And in moments when he seemed almost ready to give in, I would squeeze his hand, look him in the eyes, and silently remind him that he was capable of more than he thought, that we were capable of more than he realized. The escalation was terrifying, yes, but it also made me realize something crucial. My love, unwavering and patient, could be the lifeline that pulled him back before it was too late. And I was ready to do whatever it took. That I knew confrontation alone would never work. Shaming him, arguing, or threatening would only push him deeper into secrecy, make him defensive, or worse, make him spiral faster. So I chose a different approach. Every word, every action, every tiny gesture had to be deliberate, designed to remind James that he was loved, valued, and capable, that he mattered more to me than any fleeting thrill or gamble that IT started. With small things, leaving little notes in his wallet, reminding him of his strengths. You are smart. You are capable. You make my life better every single day. I cooked his favorite meals without asking, made sure our apartment felt warm and safe, filled with light and laughter. Whenever he returned from work, I greeted him with a smile and genuine excitement. Never a trace of judgment, never a hint of the storm I saw lurking beneath the surface. That I noticed that sometimes, during the small gestures, his posture would change. His shoulders, which often bore the invisible weight of secret debts, would relax slightly. A fleeting smile would cross his face, a softness in his eyes that reminded me of the boy I had fallen in love with. These were tiny victories, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But to me, they were everything. Words became my most powerful tool. I praised him for responsible decisions, no matter how small, paying a bill on time, choosing to skip a risky bet, even resisting the urge to check gambling apps. I reminded him of the man I saw, someone responsible, intelligent, loving. You are so capable, James. I believe in you completely. I know you can handle this. I said it often, not as empty words, but as truths I wanted him to feel, to internalize, to believe in himself. Physical touch, too, became an anchor. A hand on his back while he sat at the kitchen counter, a warm hug after a stressful day, gentle squeezes of his hands, all quiet reassurances that he wasn't alone, that I was his partner in every sense. Even the smallest gestures, brushing his hair back, holding his shoulder while he navigated a difficult call, became subtle reminders that he was loved unconditionally. I also paid attention to timing. I never approached him about his gambling directly when he was stressed or tired. Instead, I waited for moments when he was receptive, calm, or even proud of a responsible choice. Then, I offered gentle encouragement, a compliment, a gesture of gratitude. Each interaction built a foundation of trust and security, quietly counteracting the chaos that gambling had already sown in our lives. What I couldn't show outwardly, my fear, my panic, my worry about our future, I channeled into planning and patience. I knew that every act of love, every moment of validation, could slowly chip away at the hold gambling had over him. And even when he seemed oblivious, or when the debts mounted, I held on to the belief that this approach could save him. And that IT was exhausting, emotionally draining, and sometimes terrifying. But I couldn't let despair show. I had to be unwavering, consistent, and intentional. Every gesture, every word, every act of love was a lifeline I threw toward him, hoping that eventually he would grasp it, that eventually he would choose to fight his addiction not because I told him to, but because he wanted to. And in those rare, fleeting moments when he met my eyes with something like recognition, or when he allowed himself a small smile after resisting temptation, I knew we were making progress. It was slow, almost invisible to the outside world, but to me, it was monumental. Love, patience, and subtle guidance were quietly beginning to reclaim the man I loved from the grip of something that could have destroyed us both. I thought we were making progress, that my small gestures were starting to chip away at his secret world of gambling. But nothing prepares you for the moment when reality nearly crashes through the fragile safety net you've built. One evening, I noticed a series of unusual bank notifications on his phone, charges, withdrawals, transfers, things that couldn't be explained away as minor impulses. My stomach dropped, and my chest felt tight as if I couldn't breathe. He didn't notice me standing there at first, and I watched in silence, piecing together the numbers, realizing just how deep he had fallen. Our life savings, the emergency fund, and even money set aside for bills. All gone, some of it already. On the line as collateral for loans I hadn't even known existed. My heart ached, and a wave of fear washed over me, but I couldn't let him see. Not yet that I had to stay calm. If I panicked, he would retreat further into secrecy, possibly making reckless decisions out of fear or shame. Instead, I waited. I watched his behavior for days, noting the patterns, the subtle cues when he was tempted, the small victories when he resisted. And I continued with my strategy. Gestures of love, words of encouragement, physical reassurance. Every little action had to be deliberate, guiding him back without pushing him away. The tension was unbearable. He would come home, exhausted, his hands slightly trembling from stress or guilt, and I greeted him with warmth and a smile, never hinting that I knew the full extent of his secret. I made sure our apartment felt safe, comforting, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. I cooked his favorite meals, left notes reminding him how much he meant to me, and celebrated the tiniest responsible decisions as if they were monumental victories. There was one night, though, when the stakes hit dangerously close. James received a call that sounded urgent, his face pale, voice tight. It was a reminder that one impulsive bet could cost us everything. My heart raced, but I didn't confront him. Instead, I touched his arm lightly, looked him in the eyes, and said softly, "You've got this. I know you can handle it. I believe in you." The tension in his shoulders eased just slightly, and he nodded, breathing out as if the weight had lightened. That small moment, a flicker of clarity amid chaos, felt like victory that I realized then that this battle wouldn't be won with force or confrontation. It had to be patience, subtle influence, and unwavering love. Every smile, every compliment, every gentle reminder of his value was a lifeline. And I knew that the more he internalized my faith in him, the more he would begin to trust himself over the dangerous thrill of gambling. But the close call reminded me of the fragility of our situation. One wrong move, one slip, and we could lose everything: our home, our cars, our future. Yet, despite the fear, I felt a quiet determination. I couldn't control his impulses, but I could control my response. I could be his anchor. I could show him, day after day, that he was worth more than any fleeting rush, more than any gamble, more than anything that threatened to take him from me. And as I held his hand that night, feeling the tension slowly leave him, I silently vowed I would not give up. I would not allow this to destroy us. I would find a way to bring him back to the life we had dreamed of, no matter how long it took. Because love, patience, and trust were our strongest weapons. Stronger than any addiction could ever be. It wasn't an instant transformation, nothing that dramatic ever is. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to notice small shifts in James. The first time he resisted checking an online gambling app without prompting, I felt a thrill of hope. He didn't announce it. He didn't even mention it. He just quietly chose not to engage. And for me, that quiet choice was monumental that I continued to reinforce his successes with subtle encouragements. A compliment here, a gentle hug there, a whispered, "I'm proud of you," when he completed a task responsibly. I wanted him to associate small victories with love and approval, not guilt or shame. Every gesture, every word, was a careful nudge, designed to help him rebuild his confidence and sense of control. One evening, he came home after a long day at work, visibly stressed. Normally, that would have been the trigger, the perfect setup for a gamble. But that night, he paused before heading to the computer. I was nearby, silently observing, and I said softly, "You've got this. I know you can make the right choice." He looked at me, a flicker of something, recognition, determination, maybe even gratitude, crossing his eyes. And then he turned away from the screen, opting instead to help me with dinner. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a turning point. The more I reinforced his responsible behavior, the more I saw the impact. He started talking about our future again, our plans for travel, for buying a home, for simply living without the constant shadow of anxiety. He began checking in about finances, asking questions, and making small but responsible decisions. Each success built upon the last, like tiny stones paving the path back to stability that I knew it would take months, maybe years, to fully recover from the damage. But these moments were proof that he could change. Proof that love, patience, and subtle psychological reinforcement could work even in the face of a dangerous addiction. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were relapses, moments when he would hesitate, when old impulses whispered seductively, when fear of failure threatened to undo progress. But each time, I was there, carefully guiding, gently reminding, loving unconditionally. I didn't nag, I didn't shame, I simply held the line, showing him that he was valued, capable, and worthy, that he was more than his addiction, and slowly, those small victories began to snowball. Confidence returned, judgment sharpened, and a sense of responsibility, once buried under stress and temptation, began to reemerge. For the first time in months, I felt a fragile but undeniable sense of hope. The man I had loved all my life was starting to come back, not because I forced him, not because I shamed him, but because he began to believe in himself again, fueled by the quiet, unwavering support I gave him every single day. The first few months after James' turning point were delicate. Trust, once shaken, doesn't return overnight, and the wounds left by secrecy and risk lingered quietly between us. But I focused on every small opportunity to rebuild, to make him feel secure, capable, and worthy again. Every action, every gesture, had to reinforce that he wasn't defined by his past mistakes, and that together we could reclaim our life that we started with finances. The debts loomed large, but we faced them as a team. I created spreadsheets, organized statements, and helped him prioritize payments. I didn't lecture or scold. I simply presented a plan, breaking the overwhelming into manageable steps. Look, this is temporary. One step at a time, we can do this together, I would say, and he would nod, sometimes hesitant, sometimes relieved. I wanted him to see that responsibility wasn't a punishment, but a path to freedom. At home, I made sure our environment reflected calm and stability. Meals together, quiet nights without distractions, simple routines. They weren't flashy, but they provided the structure he needed. I celebrated every small victory, a debt reduced, a week without gambling, a thoughtful decision made together. Each success became a foundation upon which we could rebuild not only our finances, but our trust in each other. Emotionally, I continued to reinforce love and affirmation. You are my partner, my equal, and I am proud of you, I said often. I held him when he felt shame or frustration, and I reminded him that mistakes didn't erase the man I loved. Only actions toward change could shape a better future. Slowly, his confidence returned, his voice gained strength, and he began to share his worries with me rather than hiding them. Outside the home, we re-engaged with life we had postponed. Weekend walks, coffee dates, visits to museums, even small errands. I used these moments to quietly reinforce the normalcy we were reclaiming. I noticed him laughing more freely, making decisions without hesitation, and thinking about our shared dreams again. Each ordinary day became a subtle victory over the chaos gambling had once introduced. The most powerful changes, however, weren't in the spreadsheets or routines. They were in the moments when he looked at me with clarity in his eyes, when he initiated plans, when he acknowledged the love and patience I had poured into saving him from his own destructive habits. Trust, once broken, doesn't return in a grand gesture. It rebuilds quietly, day by day, through consistency, honesty, and unwavering support. By the end of that first year, we weren't just surviving. We were living with intention. The debts were manageable, our routines were steady, and James was becoming the man I had always known he could be. Every day was a reminder that love, patience, and small, deliberate acts could heal even the deepest fractures. That partnership wasn't just about weathering storms together, but about teaching each other how to rebuild stronger than before. And though the shadows of his past choices lingered, they no longer held power over us. We were reclaiming our life, together, with hope, with patience, and with love that refused to give up. Just as I began to believe we were on stable ground, the city reminded James of the world he had almost lost himself in. Everywhere we went, bright lights, flashy advertisements, and the constant hum of gambling opportunities surrounded us. Bars with slot machines, online ads promising easy wins, friends casually mentioning their own bets. It all felt like a test, a trap waiting for him to slip. Point one evening, a colleague invited him to a high-stakes poker night. He hesitated, then made a polite excuse, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. That flicker of temptation, however brief, was enough to remind me how fragile progress could be. I knew confrontation would push him away, so I stayed silent outwardly, keeping my anxiety private while preparing to reinforce him subtly. That night, I focused on small gestures. I made his favorite dinner, set up a calm space at home, and talked about memories from our shared past, stories that highlighted his strength, cleverness, and our bond. I whispered reminders of his accomplishments and his reliability, phrases I knew he would internalize. You are strong. You have everything you need to stay in control. I believe in you. Over the following weeks, I watched as these small acts became anchors. Each choice he made to resist temptation. Each moment he came home without engaging in risky behavior. I celebrated quietly. I never shamed him for the struggles. Instead, I pointed out the positive. Look at how well you handled that today. I'm proud of you. Those words were more than encouragement. They were a reinforcement that his worth was tied to who he was, not the games he almost lost himself in. Temptations came in subtler forms, too. He would hear about a friend winning big online, see ads flashing quick money, or feel the itch of boredom in moments of stress. I learned to recognize these moments and be there. A hand on his shoulder, a shared joke, a reminder of our plans, a story from our past that made him smile and recall the stability he now cherished. It wasn't always perfect. He faltered sometimes, struggling against impulses I couldn't fully see or control. But the difference now was significant. He had the strength to pause, to think, to choose us over the gamble. And that pause, that tiny, deliberate choice, was everything. By the end of the year, I noticed a transformation. Temptations no longer held the same power over him. He began speaking openly about his urges, laughing at the ridiculousness of some of his old habits, and planning our future with a clear sense of responsibility. Each temptation faced was a victory. Each victory a brick in rebuilding the life we had nearly lost. Through it all, I realized the importance of patience, love, and strategic support. No lecture, no threat, no confrontation, just unwavering faith and carefully chosen words and gestures. That combination was slowly turning the tide, reminding him that he was worth more than the fleeting thrill, and that together, we could face anything. James' transformation didn't happen overnight, but the change became undeniable. He started actively managing his finances, reviewing every transaction, and making careful plans to pay off the remaining debts. I watched him tackle spreadsheets, call creditors, and negotiate payment plans, things that once would have terrified him. And yet, each step he took was deliberate, measured, and most importantly, motivated by a desire to reclaim our shared life. I continued my role as support, but now it was different. He didn't need constant reassurance. He needed affirmation. In partnership, I celebrated his victories, both small and large, reinforcing the idea that he was capable of real responsibility. Look at how far you've come. I'm so proud of you, I would say, and for the first time, I felt that pride reflected back at me genuinely, not just in fleeting smiles but in his renewed confidence. Emotionally, he was stronger too. I noticed fewer moments of anxiety, less hesitation in decision-making, and a growing willingness to communicate openly about his fears and temptations. He began asking for my input, discussing plans, and sharing his thoughts without hesitation. The man who had once hidden everything in shame was slowly learning that trust could coexist with mistakes, and that love could survive near ruin. We even started revisiting some of the dreams we had postponed. Talks about moving into a bigger apartment, traveling to places we had dreamed of since high school, and even saving for a car replacement became concrete plans again. Each of these conversations was a marker of progress, a proof that he was no longer controlled by impulses, but guided by intentionality and foresight. Work. James became more diligent, focused, and proactive. He started taking pride in his accomplishments again, enjoying the sense of achievement that had been overshadowed by gambling stress. And at home, he became a partner, not just in chores and responsibilities, but in emotional support. I could finally feel the balance returning. Despite the progress, I remained vigilant. I knew addiction could resurface if left unchecked, and I knew that our relationship had been tested in the most extreme way. But now, his choices reflected the man I had always believed he could be. He was regaining control of his life, not because I forced him, but because he wanted to, and because he had experienced unwavering support that reminded him he was worth it. Every day, I saw glimpses of the future we had once feared lost. We were no longer just surviving. We were rebuilding, stronger, smarter, and more connected than ever. And with each step, the fear of past mistakes faded, replaced by hope, pride, and the quiet satisfaction that love, patience, and trust could indeed overcome even the darkest times. It was a Saturday morning when I realized just how far we had come. The sun spilled through the windows of our apartment, and the atmosphere felt light, calm, and almost impossibly peaceful. James had just finished balancing our finances for the month, a task that once would have seemed insurmountable. And he did it with a sense of pride I hadn't seen in years. That I watched him from the kitchen, making coffee, and my heart swelled. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. This was about him reclaiming his life, taking responsibility, and proving to himself that he was more than his addiction. I decided to celebrate in a small, meaningful way, the kind of gesture that reminded him both of our love and of his achievements. I left a note on the counter. "You did it. I'm proud of you. Today is a victory." When he read it, his eyes softened, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly, almost afraid to voice it. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just regaining control over finances. He was regaining faith in himself, in us, and in the possibility of a future. Free from fear, that we spent the day intentionally celebrating our progress. We cooked a favorite meal together, laughed at memories from our high school days, and even allowed ourselves a small indulgence, a dessert we had avoided during the stressful months of debt and uncertainty. Each shared moment reinforced that we were a team, partners in every sense of the word, and that love had survived the chaos. Even the simple routines felt celebratory now. James began taking the initiative in daily responsibilities, from planning errands to tidying up the apartment. His confidence had returned in subtle ways, in the firmness of his decisions, the lightness in his laugh, and the calm way he discussed finances and future plans. Each action, each choice, reminded me that change wasn't just possible, it was happening. The true victory, however, lay in his mindset. Temptation still existed, but he faced it with awareness and resilience. The power gambling once had over him had diminished, replaced with the understanding that life, love, and shared dreams were far more valuable. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the care with which he approached decisions, and the quiet gratitude he expressed without words. By the end of the day, we sat together on the balcony, holding hands, watching the city lights. I felt a surge of relief and pride. This wasn't perfection. We both knew challenges could arise, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress. And for the first time in months, I felt the heavy cloud of fear lift, replaced by hope, trust, and the knowledge that together we could weather anything. Life has a way of testing progress when you least expect it. For James, the test came in the form of a weekend trip with colleagues, a chance to unwind, celebrate work milestones, and, unbeknownst to me, temptations lurking at every corner. Bars with poker nights, online betting apps, casual wagers. Whispered into conversations, it was everything he had once succumbed to, concentrated into 2 days away from home. That I could have panicked, could have called and begged him to avoid temptation. But I knew fear and pressure would backfire. Instead, I reminded myself of everything we had built together: trust, patience, subtle reinforcement, and his slowly restored confidence. I focused on sending supportive, non-judgmental messages. Have fun, stay safe, and remember how capable you are. I believe in you. When he returned, I could see the tension immediately. He had faced every small temptation, colleagues teasing about bets, the constant pull of easy wins, and had resisted. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but with conscious effort, self-control, and a quiet determination to protect what mattered most. That I hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of the relief I couldn't have fully expressed in words. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. It wasn't just praise. It was recognition of his resilience, his commitment, and his ability to make the right choices even when everything around him screamed otherwise. That weekend confirmed something essential. Recovery isn't linear. It isn't a series of perfect decisions. It's about consistently choosing what matters over fleeting impulses, and having someone who believes in you unconditionally can tip the scales. Every subtle gesture of love, every word of encouragement, every small reinforcement I had given him over the past months had created a foundation strong enough for him to stand on. Later that night, we sat together on the couch, quiet, exhausted but content. He spoke softly, almost hesitant. I didn't realize how strong I could be until now. I held his hand and smiled, knowing that this test, while small to the outside world, was monumental in our journey. It proved that he was capable of maintaining control, that our partnership could withstand even the pressures of the world outside our home. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for his effort, but for the trust and patience that had allowed me to help him without forcing, shaming, or threatening. We had faced the storm together, and he had emerged with strength and determination, a man who now understood the value of what he had almost risked losing. This test of strength wasn't the end. Challenges would come again. But for the first time, I believed, truly believed, that James was equipped to face them, and that our love, patience, and unwavering support could carry us through anything. 2 years had passed since the moment I first realized the depth of James' struggle. 2 years of patience, quiet gestures, whispered affirmations, and unwavering belief in him. And now, finally, the weight of gambling no longer loomed over our lives. Our finances were restored. Debts were paid off, savings rebuilt, and every decision about money was made together, thoughtfully and intentionally. The apartments, the cars, the future we once feared were gone, all reclaimed with care and responsibility. But more importantly, the trust between us had been fully restored. We had survived the storm not by chance, but by choosing to face it together every single day. James' confidence had transformed. He laughed freely again, planned our days with excitement, and even began sharing dreams we had once shelved: travel, a new home, a family. The shadows of his past still existed, but they no longer dictated our present. He had learned to resist temptation, to value what truly mattered, and to trust himself as I had always trusted him. I watched him one evening, as he looked out at the city skyline from our balcony. He turned to me, eyes clear and steady, and said, "I can't believe how far we've come. I don't know if I could have done this without you." I smiled, heart full, and whispered, "You didn't need me to do it for you. I just reminded you who you were, the man I've always known you could be." We held hands, and for the first time in years, I felt complete peace. Love, patience, trust, and resilience had not only saved him from destruction, but had strengthened our bond beyond anything I had imagined. Every small gesture, every word of encouragement, every quiet moment of belief had culminated in this new beginning. The past was behind us. We were no longer defined by mistakes, debts, or moments of weakness. We were defined by our partnership, by the love that endured when everything else threatened to fall apart. And as we looked toward the future, side by side, I knew this was only the beginning of a life rebuilt stronger, wiser, and filled with hope. James had reclaimed his life, not because someone forced him, but because love, patience, and faith reminded him who he truly was. And together, we would never let the shadows return.